You earned more last year than your father earned in any 5 years of his life combined. And somehow, yes, somehow, you have less freedom than he did at your age. That's not a feeling. That's a fact you haven't sat with long enough. And the reason you haven't sat with it is because the moment you do, something breaks. Something you built your entire identity around starts to crack. There's a number, by the way, a very specific number, that determines whether your 40s become the decade you finally break free or the decade the walls finish closing in. Most people never learn what that number actually measures. It's not income, it's not net worth, it's something else entirely. And by the time we get there, you'll understand why almost nobody talks about it. You were told a story. Everyone was. The story goes like this: work hard, get promoted, earn more, and eventually, the money solves the problem. The problem being that quiet hum of anxiety you feel on Sunday evenings. The problem being that you can't actually say no. Not to the job, not to the mortgage terms, not to the school fees, not to the version of your life that looks perfect from the outside and feels like a trap from the inside. The story says more income equals more freedom. And here's what makes that story so dangerous. It's not wrong. It's just incomplete. It's a half-truth dressed in a suit. Because yes, more income gives you more options in theory. But what nobody explained is that those options come with invisible weight. Every raise you accepted came with a lifestyle adjustment you barely noticed. Every promotion came with an obligation you didn't negotiate. You didn't buy a bigger house because you wanted more space. You bought it because the old one no longer matched the story. And now, the story needs feeding. Every single month. Think about a building. Not a skyscraper, a mid-rise. Something solid, glass and steel. 12 floors, built in the center of a growing city. From the street, it looks like power. It looks like progress. People walk past it and they think, whoever owns that is winning. But here's what you don't see from the street. You don't see the foundation. You don't see that this building was constructed on a narrow base. The architects went tall instead of wide. They optimized for height, for visibility, for impression. And for a while, that works. The building stands. It even looks impressive. But the moment the ground shifts, and ground always shifts, the building doesn't just crack. It sways. The higher it went, the more vulnerable it became. Not because of what was built above ground, because of what was never built below it. That building is your financial life in your 40s. The income is the height, the visible success. The floors everyone can count from the outside. But wealth, real wealth, was never about height. It was always about width, about what's underneath, about how much lateral pressure the structure can absorb before anything moves. You added floors. You didn't widen the base. And now you're 12 stories high with a foundation built for 4. That's not a metaphor that expires. Stay with it. Because everything that follows maps back to this image. Every decision you've made about money in the last 15 years either widened your base or added another floor. And you already know which one you chose more often. There's a moment that happens in your 40s. It doesn't announce itself. There's no crisis, no dramatic collapse. It's quieter than that. It's the moment you realize that you are not building anymore. You are maintaining. You wake up one morning and the energy has shifted. You're no longer climbing towards something. You're holding something in place. And holding is exhausting in a way that climbing never was. Because climbing had momentum. Climbing had direction. Holding has none. It just has weight. This is the shift no one prepares you for. In your 20s, you had nothing to lose. That was your advantage, even though it didn't feel like one. In your 30s, you were accumulating. Speed felt like strategy. But your 40s are different. Your 40s are the decade where the cost of being wrong goes up dramatically, while the margin for recovery goes down. Not to zero, but down enough that you feel it in decisions you used to make without thinking. You hesitate now, not because you're weaker, because the stakes changed and your structure didn't. You're still operating on a system designed for acceleration, but the game is now about stability, and those are not the same game. The person who runs fast on a narrow beam looks impressive. The person who runs fast on a narrow beam in a windstorm looks reckless. Your 40s are the windstorm, not because everything falls apart, but because for the first time, things can. Your parents could get sick. Your industry could shift. Your company could restructure. Your marriage could need something you can't give while working 70 hours a week. These aren't hypotheticals. These are the things that happen to people who look exactly like you, earn exactly what you earn, and believed exactly what you believed, that more income would protect them. It didn't, because income is not protection. Income is a stream, and streams can be redirected, dammed, or dried up by forces you do not control. So what is protection then? What actually holds when the ground shifts? Here's where it gets uncomfortable, because the answer isn't a strategy. It's a realization. And the realization is this: wealth is not money. Wealth is the number of bad options you can survive without fear. Read that again in your mind. Let it sit, because that sentence reframes everything. Every financial decision you've ever made was either increasing that number or decreasing it. And most of the decisions that felt like progress, the bigger house, the nicer car, the private school, the lifestyle that matches your peers, most of those decisions decreased it. They didn't make you poorer. They made you more dependent on everything going right. And the wealthiest people you'll ever meet, not the richest, the wealthiest, are not the ones with the highest income. They're the ones who can absorb the most damage without changing how they live, how they think, or how they negotiate. That's the number no one talks about. Not your salary, not your portfolio, your survive without fear number. How many months can you sustain your life if every income stream stopped tomorrow? How many bad decisions can your structure absorb before you're forced into a choice you don't want to make? If that number is low, you are not free, no matter what your bank account says on the first of the month. Now, here's where the math actually matters. And it matters not because the numbers are complicated, but because they're simple enough to be undeniable. A person earning $200,000 a year who spends $190,000 has $10,000 in annual surplus. A person earning $90,000 who spends $50,000 has $40,000. The first person looks wealthier. The second person is wealthier. And not by a small margin, by a factor of 4. Because the second person's base is wider. Their foundation absorbs more. They can lose their job and feel discomfort. The first person loses their job and feels terror. This isn't about frugality. This isn't about cutting lattes or canceling subscriptions. That's a different conversation for a different audience. This is about the gap. The distance between what your life costs and what your life earns. In your 20s, that gap doesn't matter much because time is on your side. In your 30s, it matters, but you're still moving fast enough to ignore it. In your 40s, that gap is the entire game, because the gap is what buys you the one thing that money was always supposed to buy, but rarely does: time. Not retirement time, not vacation time, decision time. The time to say no to a bad offer, the time to wait for a better one, the time to sit in a negotiation and feel nothing while the other side sweats, the time to let a bad quarter pass without panicking, The time to think clearly when everyone around you is reacting. That gap, that quiet space between income and obligation, is the most valuable thing a person in their 40s can own. And almost nobody is building it. Because building it is invisible. It doesn't photograph well. No one congratulates you for it. Your neighbor doesn't see it. Your colleagues don't know about it. It exists entirely between you and your future, which is exactly why it works. Something changes when the gap widens, and it doesn't change in your bank account first. It changes in your voice. You speak differently in meetings when you know you don't need the outcome. You negotiate differently when walking away is a real option, not a bluff. You parent differently when your stress isn't leaking into every evening. You think differently when the next 12 months aren't load-bearing for your entire life. This is the identity shift that wealth actually creates. Not the ability to buy more. The ability to need less from any single source. Optionality. That word gets thrown around in finance circles like it's a strategy. It's not a strategy. It's a state of being. It's what happens when your foundation is wide enough that no single event can crack it. And when you reach that state, something paradoxical happens. You start earning more. Not because you're working harder, because you're negotiating from silence instead of need. Silence is the most expensive currency in any room, and only people with a wide base can afford it. You've seen this. You've sat across from someone who didn't flinch, who let the pause stretch, who didn't fill the silence with justification. And you knew immediately that person had options. That person wasn't performing confidence. They had it. Because their structure allowed it. Their life wasn't optimized for impression. It was optimized for absorption. And that changes everything. How they're treated, what they're offered, what they tolerate, what they refuse. You want to know the real reason building wealth in your 40s matters more than it ever has? It's not compound interest. It's not retirement math. It's because your 40s are the decade where your negotiating position in life is either cemented or surrendered. And negotiating position comes from one place only: the ability to survive the word no. Yours. And theirs. But here's where almost everyone gets this wrong. And this is the part that costs people years they don't get back. The mistake is not failing to save. The mistake is not ignorance. The mistake is timing the shift too late. Most people hear everything you've just heard and they agree with it. Deeply. They feel it. They recognize their own life in it. And then they say, I'll start next year. After the renovation. After the bonus. After the kids finish this school cycle. After things settle down. Things do not settle down. That's the lie your current lifestyle tells you to keep itself alive. Your lifestyle is not neutral. It is an organism. It feeds. It grows. It adapts to every raise, every bonus, every windfall, and it absorbs it before you can redirect it. And every year you wait, the base doesn't just stay the same. It narrows. Because your obligations compound just like interest does. The mortgage adjusts. The expectations inflate. The children's needs grow. The career demands escalate. The gap between income and obligation doesn't stay flat. It closes. Slowly. Invisibly. Until one day you earn more than you ever imagined, and you have less flexibility than you did a decade ago. That is not a failure of effort. That is the natural consequence of building tall without building wide. And by the time you feel it, the correction isn't painless anymore. It requires sacrifice that would have been invisible 5 years earlier. The window doesn't close forever, but it gets heavier every year. And the people who opened it in their early 40s, who started widening the base when it was still relatively easy, those people live a fundamentally different decade than those who waited. There was a question embedded at the start. Something about a number that determines whether your 40s set you free or finish closing you in. You've already figured out what it is. It's not income. It's not net worth. It's your survive without fear number. The number of months your life sustains itself without a single new dollar coming in. That number is the truest measure of where you actually stand. Not where you appear to stand. Not where LinkedIn thinks you stand. Where you stand in the dark, at 2 a.m, when the thought crosses your mind, what if this all stopped tomorrow? If that number makes you flinch, you have your answer. And if it doesn't, you already know something most people spend their entire 40s trying to learn. That freedom was never about earning more. It was about needing less from things you can't control. Your father may have earned a fraction of what you earn, but he could survive a bad year without becoming someone else. And that, quietly, without ever naming it, is the thing you've been missing. Not money, not success, width.